The night the iron gates slid open without a sound, a barefoot boy slipped through the shadows and into a world that didn't know his name. He was thin, hungry, and shaking, but when he saw the billionaire's daughter sitting in her wheelchair under the garden lights with her eyes fixed on nothing, he did something no one expected. He began to dance, not for coins, not for bread, but to make her smile. Her father saw it from the balcony and froze, because the last person he expected to bring life back to his house was a kid in torn jeans spinning on wet stone while sprinklers hissed. And before I tell you what he did next, answer this in the comments. Where are you watching from right now, and would you ever let a stranger teach your child to laugh again? If you had walked into Daniel Pierce's mansion a month before, you would have heard silence, not the comfortable kind, but the heavy kind that makes every footstep sound wrong. Daniel was a problem solver, the kind of man who built shipping ports, apps, and skyscrapers by refusing to accept the word impossible. And yet his house felt impossible every day since the crash. His wife had died on a rainy afternoon, and his little girl Lily had survived with legs that no longer obeyed her and a mind that had learned to hide away from joy. With all his money, he chased hope like it was another buyout. New doctors, new chairs, new pools, new therapies, all of it. But Lily stared past him, and every time he said, "Good morning, sunshine," she gave him quiet instead of sunlight. He talked to therapists who used soft voices and good science. He signed checks with fast strokes, and when he was alone, he stood in the doorway to her room and begged God to trade every deal he ever made for one laugh that wasn't sad. He told himself he was strong, but Daniel was the kind of strong that breaks in private, not the kind that shows. He remembered Lily before the crash. Braids, yellow shoes, and a shaky cartwheel in the yard, and he kept the shoes on a shelf where he could see them and lose his breath. His security team knew the new rules. Keep the world out because the world had already done its worst. The boy who slipped through the gate had no plan except to keep moving. His name was Cole, and he had learned to live by listening. The rhythm of kitchens closing, the sound of delivery trucks, the wait between footsteps that told him when to duck. He slept behind the grocery store most nights, next to a warm wall that hummed, and when he dreamed, he saw a kitchen table from long ago, a woman's laugh, and the shape of a house that felt safe. He didn't remember every line of the past, but he remembered music. His mom counted beats while she fried eggs, and when she was happy, she spun in a small circle and pulled him in, showing him how to clap, how to snap, how to turn sad rooms into bright ones. Then people left, bills came, and the bright rooms went away. He learned to dance at bus stops and under bridges where the echo made him feel big, and when he saw the mansion from the sidewalk that night, a palace with windows like squares of gold, he wasn't thinking of stealing. He was thinking of light. He followed the light like it was calling him, and when he saw Lily in that chair by the fountain, his chest went hot and tight because he recognized the look in her eyes, the look of someone who had misplaced her song. He stood there, unsure, then the sprinklers clicked on and drew silver lines across the path, and something in the sound, the hard hiss, the soft patter, clicked into account, and before he could tell himself to leave, his heels found the beat. Daniel was on the phone with a surgeon who talked about a new window and encouraging signals, while Daniel stared at the glow of the garden below. He had learned to hear promises without trusting them, and he kept nodding and saying yes, of course, while his eyes hunted for proof in his daughter's profile. She sat very still, her small hands folded like paper birds. Then movement at the edge of the lawn made him narrow his eyes. A boy, soaked, thin, moving like water, turning a broken space into a stage. Anger arrived before thought. How did a stranger get in? Where was the guard at the east gate? What if he frightened Lily? And then something unexpected happened. Lily's chin lifted by a half-inch. Daniel saw it because he watched her the way sailors watch weather. It wasn't much, but it was the first change in days that didn't come from a therapist's cue. The boy's steps were silly on purpose. He exaggerated his knees, pointed his toes the wrong way, did a tiny stumble, and then pretended the stumble was part of the plan. He wagged his fingers like a cartoon wizard and bowed to the fountain like it was a queen. One shoe was missing, the other had no laces. His shirt clung to him. He looked ridiculous and brave, and he did it with the bright focus of someone who knew his job and had decided not to fail. "Sir," the head of security said quietly from the doorway behind Daniel, "we've got an intruder on the south path." Daniel didn't answer right away. It felt like one of those fragile moments where a wrong word would pop the bubble. The guard waited, unsure, and Daniel kept his eyes on Lily. At first nothing, then a tiny curve at the corner of her mouth like a new moon. The boy noticed because hope is loud to people who have needed it. He took a silly step the wrong way and pretended shock, hands on cheeks, mouth in a wide O. The sprinkler burst hit him in the ear and he made it part of the show, shaking his head as if a tiny drummer lived inside. Lily made a sound. It might have been a breath with a laugh inside it. Daniel's throat went tight. Grief and joy ran at each other like kids in a field and hit him at once. The guard shifted, waiting for orders. Finally Daniel said, "Give me 30 seconds. Keep the distance. No shouting. If he touches her, if she looks scared, you move. Until then, wait." The guard, surprised to hear the word wait from a man who had never liked that word, nodded into his mic and held his team back. Cole saw the man in the balcony and the men in the shadows and knew he had stepped where he wasn't allowed. Fear told him to run. Something else told him to stay. He had seen that small almost smile, and he knew deep in the place where his mother's voice still sang, that some smiles are doors you only get to open once. So he stayed, and he made his movements lighter, softer. He kept a careful distance from Lily's chair. He never reached for her. He made the floor his partner and the water his drummer. He did a silly slow-motion run that turned into a pretend fall and popped up again with a tada so quiet it felt like a secret gift. Lily blinked faster. Her hand twitched on the armrest. When the fountain light shifted from blue to warm gold, her eyes moved toward it and then back to him. He saw it and his chest lifted. Daniel whispered, "Lily?" And he knew she wouldn't answer. Even when she tried, sounds were hard. But sometimes if you asked the right way, she gave you a small sign. He leaned on the railing, unsure whether to call out and break the spell or let a stranger steer his child's storm. The last time he watched someone try to coax a smile, it cost a fortune and ended in silent tears. This time it cost him nothing except trust, which felt more expensive than money. He thought of the way power had always worked for him. Sign the paper, buy the company, remove the problem, and how none of those verbs could be used for sorrow. Power was useless here, and maybe that was why he felt so small. He pressed his thumb into his palm until it hurt to keep himself from shouting orders. Down below, the boy switched rhythms. He tapped the stone with his heel. 1 2 1 2 3. He added a soft clap, then a chest pat, turning his body into a little drum kit. The silly shape of it made Lily's mouth open a fraction. The sound that came out was broken but bright. It was the first time in weeks his house had made that sound. "Sir," the guard murmured again, "what are your instructions?" Daniel swallowed. His heart pounded like he was about to walk into a boardroom and confess he had no plan. He said, "Give me 2 minutes," and felt the words like a cliff edge. He had no idea if he was choosing wisdom or foolishness. He only knew Lily's eyes had shifted from fog to focus, and he would trade the whole skyline not to lose that light. The boy, trusting the space he had been given, took a half step closer and stopped, testing the boundary like a person learning a new language. "Hey," he said softly, voice rough from days without enough water, "want to see the silliest robot in the world?" He didn't expect an answer. He turned his knees in, straightened his arms, and wiggled his fingers like wires. Then he did a broken robot who couldn't remember how to stand, and oh, the small miracle, Lily's laugh was a spark that almost became a flame. She covered her mouth, shy about the sound, and then dared another. Water ticked on metal. Lights hummed. For a second, Daniel forgot how to breathe. The moment cracked when a younger guard in training, too eager and not good at waiting, broke from his post and stepped onto the path. His radio clicked loud. Lily flinched and the not-quite laugh flew away like a bird scared from a branch. Daniel spun and hissed, "Stand down," but the damage had been done. Cole's eyes snapped to the guard and then to Lily's face, and he did something that felt brave and stupid at the same time. He put both hands up, palms out, showing he carried nothing, and took one careful step backward to show he would not hurt her. Then he looked at Lily and with the softest voice said, "It's okay, the robot is scared of loud sounds too." He made the robot shake, then he calmed it with an exaggerated slow breath, in out, the way he'd seen mothers do with toddlers on buses. Lily's shoulders eased, her hands unclenched. Daniel stared at the boy, startled that he knew the one trick their best therapist had taught. Follow breath to find quiet. "What's your name?" Daniel called down at last, his voice carrying across the water. Cole hesitated. Names are power, and people had used his carelessly. He looked up into the kind of face that usually sent him running, but the man's voice did not have the knife edge he expected. It was careful, and that made something inside him brave. "Cole," he said simply, like it was a question. "I'm Daniel," came the answer, quieter now. Silence stretched. In the silence, they all heard the fountain's steady rhythm, and the world felt like it was counting with them. "Cole," Daniel said, testing the name like a lock he was trying to open. "Why did you come in here?" Cole thought of a dozen answers that would make a rich man relax. "I'm sorry, I got lost. I was looking for food." But none of them were true. He chose the truth because the girl in the chair deserved it. "She looked sad," he said, tipping his chin toward Lily. "And I know how to dance for sad. My mom used to say you can't fix everything, but you can bring a laugh to the door and see if it wants to come in." Daniel's jaw worked. He felt something old and warm in those words that he had not let himself feel in a long time. He did not cry, not here, not now. He made his voice steady. You scared us walking in. We keep things locked because sometimes the world is rougher than we expect. I know, Cole said, eyes on the ground. I'm sorry for scaring her. I can go. The idea of him leaving, of the light going out, made Daniel speak fast. Wait. The young guard flinched, confused by a command that didn't sound like the others. Daniel gave a small motion with 2 fingers and the guard backed off. Daniel came down the stone stairs himself, legs unsteady as if he were the one learning to walk. He stopped at a respectful distance, his hands empty just like Cole's. Up close, he saw everything he hadn't seen from the balcony. The boy's raw knuckles, the blistered heel, the damp hair, the careful way he stayed 2 arm lengths from Lily. He saw a kid who had been told no by life so many times he'd learned how to turn it into a dance step. You have a way with her, Daniel said, his voice as gentle as he could make it. I don't know what I'm doing half the time, Cole admitted, but I know when a room needs a beat. Sometimes a beat is enough to keep a heart from falling down. Lily made a tiny sound and both of them turned. She wasn't looking at the fountain now. She was looking at Cole, very slowly like a flower learning day. From night, her right hand lifted from the armrest the smallest distance. It was so small most people would have missed it. Daniel, who had measured hope in millimeters for months, saw it and went weak. Lily, he whispered. Hey baby, I see you. Cole, understanding without being told that big praise can scare small bravery, didn't clap or shout. He bowed his head a little like he was in church and said, Thank you, robot, and did a sweet slow arm wave back, matching her pace. The match made Lily try again. Her fingers trembled like leaves. Then, one finger lifted a little higher. The sound Daniel made was halfway between a laugh and a cry. The older guard swallowed hard and looked away. A wind rose, tossing the garden lamps with a soft chime. Clouds moved. The sprinklers shut off with a click and water dripped from Cole's hair. In the quiet, a car engine rolled up the drive and idled. Daniel's sister Kay had come to check on him because big brothers who stop sleeping are easy to read. She stepped out, saw the scene and froze. Danny? She whispered. Daniel lifted a hand like a man trying to hold a soap bubble in the air. 1 minute, he said, eyes on Lily. Kay followed his gaze and put a hand to her mouth. She had been the brave one at hospital rooms, the loud laugh when silence got heavy, but even she did not move. The air felt like a seesaw and no one wanted to jump off first. Cole, Daniel said at last, choosing every word like he was picking up glass. If I asked you to come back tomorrow to do this again, would you? Cole's eyes startled. No one asked him to come back anywhere. He lived in the world of leaving. He looked at Lily, then at the gate, then at Daniel. I don't want to make trouble, he said. You already made something else, Daniel answered, voice breaking on the edges. You made a door open in my little girl. I'll make sure you're safe while you're here. I'll make sure you eat. He stopped because the wrong promise could turn a gift into a deal and the boy would hear it. Just, would you come? Cole was about to nod when the radio on the young guard's belt crackled loud again with a burst of static and a voice barking. Southgate alarm tripped. Unknown activity. The sound was sharp as a slap. Lily startled hard. Her hand jerked. Her right foot, which barely moved these days, flinched with it. Just a twitch, but it was real. Cole's eyes went wide. Daniel's heart leapt to his throat. The older guard swore under his breath and reached to kill the radio, but it was too late. The quiet broke. From the hedge beyond the gate came the scuff of someone running, fast, clumsy, then a crash as a trash bin tipped. Kay turned toward the sound. Daniel stepped in front of Lily's chair without thinking. The young guard pulled his flashlight and swept the hedge. Cole stood still as stone, caught between staying and bolting. The beam of the light ripped the dark and landed on a figure crouched by the gate. Small, hood up, hands digging. The figure looked up at the light and froze. Cole's face changed, the way faces change when they recognize a shape they were trying not to see. Daniel noticed the look and felt the ground tilt. Who is that? He asked, but Cole didn't answer. The figure sprang, pushed through the gap in the hedge and vanished across the service road. The alarm on the south gate began its steady beep, beep, beep. Lily squeezed the armrest, eyes flicking after the running shadow, then back to Cole. She looked scared in a new way, like the story inside her had shifted. Daniel had to make a choice. Chase the shadow or hold the moment. He knelt by Lily instead, because he finally understood which kind of power mattered. I'm here, he told her, and meant it, not with money but with his whole body. The older guard signaled 2 men to sweep the south gate. Kay took a slow breath and wiped her eyes. Cole took one small step closer, then stopped, waiting for permission that wasn't a word. Daniel looked up at him, and in that look was a question larger than a yes or no. Will you stay when the house remembers how to be scared? The air tasted like a storm was deciding whether to arrive or break apart, and then, as if the night had one more card to play, Lily's right foot twitched again, this time on purpose, her toes straining like they were listening for music under the stone. The old world, where nothing moved, cracked a little more. Daniel reached for her hand with fingertips that shook. The alarm kept beeping, the south hedge rustled. Cole's eyes flicked toward the gap and then back to Lily, and he whispered, "Not to Daniel or the guards or the hedge, but to the girl in the chair. Robot, if you can lift a toe, I can learn a new step." And as he said it, a second shadow rose where the first had disappeared, taller, slower, like someone who had been waiting for the noise to cover their entrance. Kay saw it first, pointed, and the young guard swung his light, catching a pale scar across the newcomer's cheek. Daniel stood, heart thundering. The tall figure raised both hands in the universal sign of "I'm not a threat," and spoke a name that made Cole's whole body stiffen. "Cole?" And in the brittle quiet that followed, somewhere between fear and hope, Lily's voice, dusty from disuse, scraped out one soft word that sounded like the start of a miracle: "Stay." And before anyone could move, the tall stranger took one step forward and said something that cracked the night in half. The night ended without answers, only questions that burned through Daniel's thoughts long after the sprinklers stopped. The sound of Lily's voice, faint, cracked, real, echoed in his mind like an unfinished song. Stay. One word, but it was everything he had prayed to hear for months. Yet that word came just before chaos. The alarm, the running figure, the stranger calling Cole's name. He spent the rest of that night pacing the hallway outside Lily's room, too afraid to close his eyes in case the magic of that moment dissolved by morning. At dawn, sunlight crept through the tall windows of the mansion. The guards were still on alert, searching for the tall man who had vanished through the south hedge. No prints, no name, no trace, like the dark had swallowed him whole. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch in his study, still wearing last night's clothes, a cold cup of coffee beside him. He had called off the police report at the last minute. Something about the way Cole froze at the sight of the man told him there was more to the story, something deeper, maybe dangerous, maybe sacred. The doctor arrived early that morning. Dr. Evans had been Lily's physical therapist for months, and he had long since stopped expecting surprises. But when Daniel told him what happened, that Lily laughed, that her foot moved, Dr. Evans paused mid-note. "You're saying spontaneous response to stimulus?" he asked. Daniel nodded. "Unassisted," he said quietly. "And verbal output, a single word." The doctor leaned back, skeptical but hopeful. "That's unexpected. Encouraging if it's consistent." Daniel's fingers tightened around the mug. "I don't think it was medicine, doctor. I think it was him, the boy. The homeless one your guards found?" "Yes, Cole." Dr. Evans gave a slow, clinical nod. "Sometimes emotional triggers do what therapy can't. I'd like to see this boy if possible." Daniel exhaled. "If he comes back." Outside, the mansion garden looked different under sunlight. The ground where Cole had danced was still wet, shoe prints overlapping sprinkler puddles. The guards had tightened security, but Daniel had ordered one gate left unlocked, the same one Cole used. "He'll come back," Daniel told himself. "He has to." Lily sat in the breakfast room, hair brushed, blanket over her legs. She was quieter than usual, but her eyes were alive in a new way, following sounds, flickering with thought. Kay sat beside her, reading softly from a storybook, while Daniel stood behind the glass, watching. He hadn't told Lily that he hoped Cole would return. He didn't want to fill her with another promise that might break. Hours passed. Noon came. Then 2. Nothing. But at 4:30 the East Gate camera picked up movement. A small figure, barefoot again, carrying a plastic bag. Cole. The guards moved to intercept, but Daniel stopped them over the radio. "Let him in." Cole hesitated at the gate, unsure if he'd be arrested this time. When the gate clicked open instead of locking, he stepped through slowly, clutching the plastic bag tighter. Daniel met him halfway down the garden path. The sun was low, and the air carried the smell of wet grass and new rain. "You came back," Daniel said. Cole nodded, nervous. "She asked me to stay." Daniel smiled faintly. "She did." He noticed the plastic bag. "What's that?" Cole pulled it open carefully. Inside were wildflowers, some broken, some missing petals, all arranged as best as small hands could. "For her," he said. "I thought she might like color." Daniel's throat tightened. "She will." He led Cole toward the terrace where Lily sat in her chair, watching the fountain again. When she saw him, her fingers twitched and a slow, cautious smile appeared. "Hey, robot," Cole said softly, raising the flowers like a trophy. You like purple or yellow better? Lily blinked twice, her signal for yes to both. Cole grinned. Good answer. He began placing the flowers in a small cup of water by her tray table. Kay leaned toward Daniel. You sure this is safe? She whispered. Daniel nodded. He's not here to hurt her. He's here to heal her. Dr. Evans arrived shortly after, quietly observing from a few steps away. He saw Lily's posture change, the way she leaned slightly forward, following Cole's movements. It wasn't therapy, but it was connection. Cole, Daniel said, Dr. Evans is Lily's therapist. He helps her learn to move again. Cole nodded shyly. Hi, sir. Dr. Evans smiled. Hi, Cole. I hear you're quite the dancer. Cole rubbed the back of his neck. Not really. Listen. Every sound has a beat. You just have to find it. Do you dance for yourself? Cole hesitated. No. I dance for quiet people. They need it more. Lily made a tiny sound, half laugh, half hum. Everyone turned toward her. Cole knelt. You want to try something new? Her eyes met his. She nodded once. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 bottle caps. These are magic, he whispered. They make beats if you shake them right. He placed one in Lily's palm and kept one for himself. He shook his softly, tap tap, then waited. Lily tried. Her hand shook, but the faint sound of metal tapping filled the air. Daniel had to look away for a moment because his vision blurred. Kay covered her mouth again. Dr. Evans whispered, unprompted coordination. That's not nothing, Daniel. Cole grinned. You hear that? That's our song starting. They played like that until the sun sank behind the trees. Tap tap, laugh, pause, try again. Every time Lily dropped the cap, Cole made it part of the rhythm. That's the drop beat, he said each time, making her giggle. When Daniel walked them back toward the garden entrance, he asked gently, Cole, the man last night, the one who called your name. Who was he? Cole froze. The air changed. The light dimmed even though the sun hadn't set. I don't know if I should say. You're safe here, Daniel assured. But I need to understand. Cole's voice was quiet. He's my brother. Or used to be. We got split when his voice faltered. He doesn't like me being around rich people. Says they break promises. Daniel didn't press. He only said, you're welcome here if you come through the front gate next time. Cole smiled a little. Front gate feels too big. I'll try the side. That night, Daniel sat at his desk watching security footage, Lily's movements, her smiles, Cole's laughter echoing through the microphone hidden near the fountain. For the first time, Daniel realized money couldn't buy what that boy carried in his chest, warmth that felt like sunlight. But not everyone in the mansion shared his sentiment. The next morning, one of the senior guards, Mason, knocked sharply on Daniel's office door. Sir, if I may speak freely, that boy shouldn't be here. Daniel looked up from his papers. Why not? He's a street kid. No background, no address, no guardian. You let him around your daughter without knowing who he really is. Daniel's tone hardened. He gave my daughter hope. That's more background than most people I've hired. Hope doesn't keep you safe, Mason said. We can't run security on feelings. Daniel sighed. Then run it on facts, discreetly. No one makes him feel hunted. But Mason didn't listen. By afternoon, he had already instructed 2 guards to follow Cole when he left through the hedge again. Meanwhile, Cole sat by the fountain with Lily, humming softly as they played beat drops again. She managed to lift her fingers higher this time, tapping the bottle cap against the tray. Her laughter came easier now, light, unafraid. Inside, Kay watched from the window, smiling through tears. He's a miracle in sneakers, she whispered. Daniel nodded. Yeah, a barefoot miracle. At that moment, a loud shout broke from the driveway, one of the guards yelling, Hey! Stop! Daniel rushed out, heart pounding. Cole was standing near the outer gate, hands raised again. A tall man with a scar across his cheek, the same one from the night before, was on the other side of the fence. Cole, the man called. You can't stay here. Leave me alone, Nick. Cole shouted back. Daniel stepped between them. Nick, you're his brother? The man glared. Yeah. And you're the billionaire who thinks playing with poor kids makes him holy? Watch your tone, Mason snapped, stepping forward. Nick sneered. You've got guards, cars, everything. You think you can save him? You can't. People like you don't keep promises. Daniel's voice lowered. Maybe not all do. But I'm trying. Cole's eyes filled. Nick, please don't do this. Nick's face twisted. You think they'll love you? The minute you stop making their little girl smile, you'll be out again. You'll see." He turned and stormed off. Cole stood trembling. "I'm sorry," he said to Daniel. "He doesn't mean it. He's just mad all the time." Daniel rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "He's scared. People hide fear behind anger. I've done it too." Cole looked up. "You?" Daniel nodded. "I lost my wife. Thought money could buy peace. It didn't. I got angry instead. I almost lost Lily too." Cole swallowed. "Then we both lost something." That night Daniel told Kay, "We're keeping him. At least until I find out where he belongs." Kay smiled. "He already found it, Danny. Look at her." Lily was asleep in her chair, one hand curled around the metal cap like a treasure. But as peace settled, danger crept closer. Mason, ignoring Daniel's warning, had followed Nick that evening. What he discovered chilled him. Nick wasn't just angry, he was desperate. He'd been living in an abandoned workshop nearby, owing money to men who didn't forgive. When Mason returned with that report, Daniel knew something was coming. 2 days later it came. It started quietly. Cole didn't show up in the morning. Lily waited by the window, her cap in hand, looking toward the gate. Hours passed. Still nothing. Daniel called the guards. No sight of him anywhere. By evening, Lily's progress cracked. She wouldn't eat. She wouldn't move. She turned her face away like a light dimming. Kay said, "Maybe he left. Maybe his brother took him." Daniel's jaw set. No. He wouldn't just leave her. That night, rain began again, heavy and cold. Daniel couldn't sleep. He went to the window and saw the side gate swinging open. He grabbed his coat and ran. Outside, thunder rumbled. At the far end of the garden, near the hedge, he saw movement, a figure stumbling toward the house. Cole. Soaked, bleeding from a scrape on his arm, clutching something close to his chest. "Cole!" Daniel shouted. "What happened?" Cole staggered forward. "They took him, my brother. They said if I didn't steal from you, they'd hurt him." He gasped, voice breaking. "I didn't do it. I swear." Daniel grabbed his shoulders. "Easy. You're safe." Mason appeared, flashlight cutting through the rain. "Sir, there's movement by the road. 3 men." Daniel turned, instincts firing. "Get Lily inside now." The men at the road shouted something Daniel couldn't hear over the storm. One of them fired a shot into the air. Lily screamed from the balcony above, the first real scream she'd made in a year. Daniel pulled Cole behind a stone column. "Who are they?" "The ones Nick owes money to," Cole cried. "They think you're hiding him." Mason's men spread out. One grabbed the radio, calling backup. Daniel clenched his fists. "You listen to me," he said to Cole, steady despite the chaos. "We protect our own in this house. That includes you." He led the boy through the side corridor toward the safe room as guards exchanged shouts outside. Lightning flashed, illuminating faces filled with fear and fire. For the first time in years, Daniel wasn't thinking about money or loss. He was thinking about the one thing he almost forgot how to do: fight for something worth more than himself. Behind them, through the storm, Lily called out again, this time stronger, clearer, "Dad!" Daniel froze. She had said it. After all the silence, all the pain, she had said Dad. Tears blurred his vision. "I'm here, baby," he shouted back. Cole turned, eyes wide with joy. But before they could take another step, the mansion's power cut out. The lights died. The alarms wailed. The storm outside wasn't just thunder anymore, it was footsteps closing in. And somewhere beyond the hedge, Nick's voice called through the rain, trembling, "Cole, I didn't mean to run." Daniel grabbed the boy's hand and whispered, "Stay close. Whatever happens, don't stop moving." Then the front door burst open. The mansion plunged into darkness as the thunder rolled above like drums of warning. For a long heartbeat, Daniel couldn't tell if it was the storm or the danger that made the ground tremble beneath his feet. The only sound was Lily's frightened voice calling from the upstairs balcony, "Dad!" A word he'd waited months to hear, a word that hit his chest harder than the lightning splitting the sky. He wanted to run to her, to lift her, to promise her that everything was okay, but there was no time. The men were already breaking through the hedge, shouting to one another, their shadows flickering in the blue-white flashes of light. Mason barked orders through the rain, his guards spreading out like chess pieces across the slick courtyard. Daniel grabbed Cole by the wrist, pulling him toward the narrow hallway that led to the safe room, his voice low but fierce. "Stay right behind me no matter what happens." Cole's breath came fast, his thin chest rising and falling, wet hair clinging to his forehead. "I didn't mean for them to come," he gasped, guilt shaking his voice. They said they'd let my brother go if I just— You don't owe them anything, Daniel cut in sharply. You hear me? You're not stealing anything. You already gave my daughter back her smile. He didn't know why he said that in the middle of chaos, but it was true, and truth had a strange way of keeping him calm when everything else was falling apart. They reached the hallway and pushed through the heavy oak door just as a crash echoed from the front entrance. Glass shattered. Someone yelled, "He's in there. Get the boy." The word sent a chill through Daniel's spine. Cole stumbled beside him, terrified. Daniel shut the door, turned the deadbolt, and pressed his back against it, trying to slow his breathing. Rain hammered the roof, every drop like a countdown. "We'll be fine," Daniel said, mostly to himself. "We'll be fine." Cole's voice was barely a whisper. "They want money. That's all they ever want." Daniel looked at him in the dim light from the emergency lamp. "And if I give them money, they'll want more. The only thing greed understands is fear." The sound of heavy boots came closer, muffled but determined. Mason's radio cracked with static somewhere beyond the door. "Sir, we've got 2 detained. One's down near the fountain. There's another trying to circle through the east side." Daniel shouted back, "Secure Lily's room. That's the priority." He turned to Cole again. "Do you know where your brother might go if he's scared?" Cole hesitated, trembling. "There's an old workshop down the hill. We used to stay there after our mom." His voice broke. "He goes there when he thinks he's lost everything." Daniel thought fast. "Then that's where they'll run if they fail here." He placed a hand on Cole's shoulder. "Listen, no one blames you for this. Not me. Not Lily. You understand?" Cole's lips trembled. "But if someone gets hurt, then we'll get through it together," Daniel said firmly. "You're not alone anymore." The boy's eyes shone with tears that mixed with rain on his cheeks. Outside, a deafening boom made them flinch. The front gate had been blown open. Daniel knew that sound, the steel cracking, the locks giving way. Mason yelled something he couldn't make out. Then came silence, eerie and deep. Daniel pulled the small revolver from the safe room drawer, his hand steady even though his heart raced. He didn't want to use it, but fear had its own voice and it told him to be ready. "Stay behind me," he said, and cracked the door open a few inches. The air smelled of wet soil and gunpowder. Lightning lit the courtyard again, showing the chaos. A truck idling near the gate, 2 men shouting at Mason's guards, one with a crowbar, one holding something worse. Daniel's instinct said to run, to hide, but another part of him refused to let danger win on the same ground where his daughter had just begun to live again. He stepped into the rain, pulling Cole with him. "Daniel, get back inside," Mason shouted. But Daniel didn't listen. He raised his voice against the storm. "You came for money, right? Then you'll talk to me, not him." The man with the crowbar turned, his face half hidden by a soaked hoodie. "Where's the boy?" he demanded. "We don't need you, old man. Just him. You hurt him and you'll have every camera in this city on your face by morning," Daniel said. "You think you can just walk onto my property and—" The other man interrupted, stepping forward. His voice was cold, deliberate. "Your property? That's the problem with men like you. Everything's yours until it's broken. Then it's no one's." Cole tugged on Daniel's sleeve, whispering, "That's Mark. He's one of the guys who comes after Nick." The name clicked. So these weren't random thieves, they were debt collectors, the kind that didn't leave receipts. The rain intensified, turning every sound into a blur. "You want your money?" Daniel shouted over the thunder. "Take it and go. But the boy stays." Mark laughed, shaking his head. "You think money fixes everything? That's cute." He raised his hand, and for a terrifying moment, Daniel saw the glint of metal. Mason's voice roared from behind. "Drop it." A shot rang out, sharp, echoing through the courtyard. Cole screamed. Daniel froze. One of the men stumbled backward, clutching his arm, blood blooming through his sleeve. Mason's guard surged forward, wrestling the other to the ground. Mark spun and ran toward the hedge, disappearing into the trees. Sirens wailed in the distance, neighbors, police, or both. Daniel dropped the gun he hadn't fired, his chest heaving. Cole was shaking uncontrollably. "It's over," Daniel whispered, pulling the boy into his arms. "You're safe now." But Cole didn't relax. His voice broke. "No, it's not. If Mark runs back to Nick, they'll come again. They always do." Daniel held his shoulders firmly. "Not here, they won't." He meant it. He wasn't going to let another ghost ruin his daughter's chance at life. That night, after the police left and the storm cleared, the mansion was a ruin of puddles and silence. Lily was asleep again, exhausted from crying. Kay sat with her while Daniel and Mason cleaned the front hall. "You should have stayed back," Mason muttered. "If that bullet went wrong, if I stayed back," Daniel interrupted, "we'd still be waiting for someone else to save us." He looked at the cracked glass door, the rainwater mixing with blood on the marble. "Sometimes you have to bleed for peace." Mason sighed, knowing it was useless to argue. Upstairs, Cole sat wrapped in a blanket, staring at the flickering fireplace. He hadn't said a word since they brought him in. Daniel approached slowly, a mug of warm milk in his hands. "Drink this." Cole shook his head. "I don't deserve it." "Why?" "Because I brought them here. If Lily got hurt, she didn't. And if not for you, she might never have spoken again." Daniel sat beside him. "I used to think being strong meant not letting anyone in. But you," he smiled faintly. "You reminded me strength looks different when it's shared." Cole looked up, eyes red. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Daniel said softly. "I know that you dance to heal people instead of hurt them. That's enough for me." For the first time that night, Cole smiled a little. "You really think Lily will be okay?" "I think she already is." They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire fade. But somewhere beyond those walls, Mark hadn't gone far. He met Nick in the old workshop down the hill, where the roof leaked and the floor was cold. Nick's face was pale when he saw him. "Did you do it?" Mark spat. "You told me that rich guy was soft. You didn't say he had a private army." Nick ran a hand through his wet hair. "I told you to leave my brother alone." "He's the one who brought me trouble," Mark growled. "You better fix it or I'll come back for both of you." He slammed the door behind him, leaving Nick shaking in the dark. By morning, Daniel's house was quiet again. Lily woke to sunlight on her face, and for the first time, she said a word without fear. "Cole." Daniel's eyes filled when he heard it. He called softly, "He's here, baby. He's right here." Cole stepped into the room shyly. Lily's smile returned, small but pure. "Dance," she whispered. He looked at Daniel, who nodded. Cole took one step, then another, spinning slowly as Lily clapped, weak, uneven, but full of joy. The sound filled the room like music. Daniel turned away for a moment, hiding his tears. The house that once echoed with grief now breathed with laughter again. But deep down, Daniel knew peace like this never came without a shadow. Somewhere out there, a storm still waited to finish what it started. As evening came, the lights dimmed to a golden glow. Daniel sat by Lily's bedside, holding her hand, while Cole dozed in a chair nearby. Kay stood by the window looking out toward the hill. A single figure stood there for a moment before disappearing into the mist. Nick, watching, deciding. And though the night seemed still, everyone in that house felt the truth. The story wasn't finished yet. Because miracles never come without a price. The next morning broke quiet and heavy, the kind of silence that doesn't bring peace but holds its breath for whatever comes next. Daniel sat alone in the living room, his elbows on his knees, staring at the wet streaks of light filtering through the curtains. The night had passed, the storm was gone, but the unease hadn't left with it. It clung to the air like a scent no one could wash away. The police report had been filed, though Daniel downplayed the details to keep Lily's name out of it. Mason wanted extra men stationed around the estate, but Daniel refused. "No flashing guns in my yard," he said. "This house has seen enough fear." He poured himself coffee he wouldn't drink and stared at the front gate through the window, half expecting that scarred man Mark to appear again. He didn't. Not yet. Upstairs, Lily was awake earlier than usual. She sat in her wheelchair by the window, her face calm but focused, watching the driveway. Her fingers drummed lightly on the armrest, a small habit she had learned from Cole. It was her way of saying she was waiting. When Daniel came in, she lifted her chin slightly, the faintest spark of a smile forming. "He'll come," he said softly. "He promised." Lily nodded once, eyes still searching the path. Downstairs, Cole was already awake too. He had barely slept, the night's memory playing on loop. Thunder, gunshots, the sound of Lily screaming, Nick shouting his name. He sat by the fire, turning one of Lily's bottle caps over and over between his fingers. When Daniel came in, Cole jumped to his feet. "I can go," he said quickly. "If it keeps her safe, I'll leave. They won't follow me here again." Daniel studied him, then shook his head slowly. "Leaving isn't what keeps people safe, Cole. Staying honest does." He sat down across from him, his tone calm but firm. "You didn't bring trouble. The world did. But I won't let it win." Cole hesitated, unsure if he believed that, but he nodded anyway. "She laughed yesterday," he murmured. "Even after everything. She laughed." Daniel smiled faintly. She hasn't laughed in a year, not like that. Whatever happens, don't forget, you gave her that. The front gate creaked around noon. Mason went out first, hand on his sidearm, but it wasn't Mark or Trouble. It was Nick. His clothes were still damp, his face drawn, eyes sunken from exhaustion. He raised his hands as Mason approached. "I need to see my brother," he said quietly. "Please. I didn't mean for any of this. I didn't send those men. They found out about the mansion. I tried to stop them." Daniel stepped out onto the porch. For a long second, the two men just stared at each other, the billionaire who had everything except peace and the man who had nothing but guilt. "You've got 5 minutes," Daniel said finally. "If you lie, you don't get 6. Nick nodded quickly, voice trembling. "Fair." Cole appeared in the doorway behind Daniel. When he saw his brother, he froze. His throat worked like he wanted to say something, but no words came. Nick looked at him, eyes wet. "Cole," he whispered, taking a hesitant step forward. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this. I was just..." Cole's face hardened, a mix of pain and anger. "You always say sorry when it's too late." "I didn't know they'd follow you here," Nick said. "They wanted money I didn't have. I thought if I hid..." "You thought wrong," Daniel interrupted. "You almost got a little girl hurt." Nick's eyes darted to him. "I know, and I'll fix it. I swear. Just, please don't call the cops again. They'll find me if I go inside." Daniel folded his arms. "You should have thought about that before you brought a storm to my door." Nick bowed his head, defeated. "I don't blame you for hating me." "I don't hate you," Daniel said quietly. "But I hate what fear does to good people." He looked at Cole. "You said he used to dance with you, right?" Cole's eyes widened, surprised. "Yeah, when we were kids. Mom made us." She said dancing keeps sadness from growing roots. Daniel's tone softened. "Then maybe that's what he needs to remember." He gestured toward the patio. "Go on. Show him." Cole blinked. Now, Daniel said. "Before fear roots again." Cole hesitated, but the look in Daniel's eyes told him it wasn't a suggestion. He stepped out onto the stone path, the same one where he had danced for Lily the first night. The ground was dry now, sunlight warm against his face. Nick stood a few feet away, uncertain, hands in his pockets. "I can't," Nick muttered. "I haven't danced in years." "Then watch," Cole said softly. He closed his eyes and began to move, not wild, not for show, but slow and deliberate. His bare feet whispered across the stone. He remembered the rhythm his mother used to hum in their tiny kitchen, the way she'd clap on the offbeat just to make them laugh. He swayed, twisted, spun once, caught the wind in his arms and opened his eyes. Nick was crying. "I forgot what that felt like," Nick said, his voice cracking. "You shouldn't have had to remember it this way." He stepped forward, hesitating only once, then clapped along to the rhythm, offbeat and clumsy but real. Daniel watched from the porch as the brothers, broken and bruised, danced in the sunlight like two halves of a promise being put back together. For the first time he didn't see danger in them. He saw reflection. His own pain, his own mistakes, the way grief had turned him into stone until someone's small act of joy cracked it open. When the song ended, Cole turned to Daniel. "He didn't mean it. He just got lost." Daniel nodded. "We all do." He walked closer, his expression steady. "Nick, you've got a choice now. You can run again or you can stay and fix what you broke." Nick looked at his brother, then at the house. "If I stay, those men will come for me. They don't forget." "Then let them come for me instead," Daniel said firmly. "You're not alone anymore." Nick stared at him, disbelief in his eyes. "Why would you do that?" "Because someone once danced for my daughter when the world gave up on her. I figure I owe him something." Nick's voice shook. "I don't deserve that kind of grace." "No one does," Daniel said. "That's what makes it grace." That night, Daniel let Nick sleep in the guest room. Mason protested, of course, muttering about risk and safety, but Daniel silenced him with one look. "Trust is never safe," he said. "It's just necessary." Cole sat up with Lily until she drifted to sleep. Before she closed her eyes, she whispered, "You stayed." He smiled. "I promised." When she was asleep, he stepped out into the hallway, finding Daniel leaning against the banister, looking toward the stars. "You really mean it?" Cole asked. "You're letting him stay?" "I'm letting him try," Daniel said. "There's a difference." He turned to the boy. "You remind me of someone I used to be before life taught me to flinch at everything." "Who?" "A man who believed small things could fix big pain." Daniel smiled faintly. Turns out he was right. But peace never lasts long when it's built over broken ground. The next evening, Mason received a call from one of the patrolmen stationed near the outer road. "Sir, we found tire marks by the old workshop. 2 vehicles, maybe 3. Looks like someone's watching the house." Daniel's stomach tightened. "They're back." Mason nodded grimly. "They're not stupid enough to hit again tonight, not after the cops came. But they're planning something." Daniel looked toward the garden, where Lily and Cole were laughing softly. "We'll be ready." When night fell, the house lights dimmed. The guards rotated shifts. But Daniel couldn't sleep. He walked to his study, poured himself a drink, and sat in the quiet. Then he heard it, soft tapping at the back door. "What?" "Twice." He grabbed the flashlight, heart pounding, and opened it slowly. Nick stood there, pale and breathless. "They found me," he whispered. "They said if I don't hand over what I owe by tomorrow, they'll burn this place down." Daniel stepped closer. "How much?" "30,000. Daniel exhaled. "That's nothing to me." "No," Nick said quickly. "You don't understand. If you pay them, they'll just ask for more. The only way this ends is if they think I'm dead." Daniel's eyes hardened. "You're not dying on my property." Nick gave a desperate smile. "Then you better have another miracle ready because they're coming back." He ran a hand through his hair. "I can lead them away. Just keep Cole safe, please." Before Daniel could stop him, Nick turned and ran into the night, vanishing down the slope toward the workshop. By morning, the police found tire tracks again, fresh ones leading away toward the highway. No one knew where Nick went. Daniel didn't tell Cole right away. He wanted to protect him, but by evening the boy knew. "He's gone, isn't he?" Cole said quietly. "He's trying to save us the only way he knows how." Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes love looks like leaving. But he'll come back. People who carry guilt always do." The days that followed were strangely calm. Lily's strength improved. She could move one leg now, then the other slightly. Dr. Evans couldn't explain it medically, but Daniel didn't need an explanation. He had seen miracles before, but never one that smiled like his daughter. Cole spent his afternoons reading to her, his evenings helping Kay water the garden. Every night, he stood by the gate for a few minutes, waiting for a shadow he hoped would return. On the 5th night, it did. Nick stumbled back up the drive just past midnight, bruised but alive. He carried nothing but a torn jacket and a paper envelope. Daniel met him halfway. "You look terrible," he said. "You should see the other guys," Nick muttered, weak but smiling. He handed Daniel the envelope. Inside were photographs, proof of the men who had followed them, their faces, their car plates. "You can stop them now," Nick said. "They won't come back." "How?" "Because they think I'm gone. I made sure of it." He swayed, exhausted. Daniel caught him before he fell. "You're safe now," he said. "Both of you." The next morning, when Lily saw Nick sitting by the fountain, she clapped her hands, beaming. Cole laughed through tears. Daniel stood at the balcony watching the 3 of them, his daughter, her healer, and the brother who had almost lost everything but found it again. For the first time in years, he felt something that wasn't control or fear. It was peace. And though he knew the world outside those gates would always spin with noise and danger, inside that garden, the rhythm was simple. A quiet beat that whispered of second chances and grace earned the hard way. The days that followed felt like borrowed peace, a fragile calm that everyone in the house clung to with silent gratitude. Morning sunlight poured through the windows, painting gold lines across the floor where Lily's wheelchair rolled softly back and forth. She no longer needed help to turn it now. Her hands had found their strength again, small but certain, and every time she moved, she wore the proud smile of someone who'd just learned how to touch freedom. Daniel would stop whatever he was doing and watch her, his chest tightening with something between joy and disbelief. Each laugh she gave sounded like a new promise from heaven that pain wouldn't have the final word. Cole stayed by her side every day, teaching her how to move to rhythm. They clapped to slow songs, spun the chair in tiny circles, and sang nonsense tunes that made even Kay laugh. The mansion, once cold as marble, had become a living, breathing home again. Yet beneath the laughter, Daniel felt an unease he couldn't name. Sometimes when he looked out the window, he caught the faintest movement near the far fence. Someone watching. Mason insisted it was imagination, but Daniel's instincts, sharpened by years of business wars and betrayals, told him peace like this didn't last without cost. He just didn't know what that cost would be yet. Nick had recovered slowly. His bruises had faded, but the guilt on his face didn't. Every night, he'd walk alone by the garden, staring up at the house as if he couldn't believe he was still allowed to stay there. Cole always joined him eventually, the two brothers sitting in silence near the fountain where their story began. "You think Mom would be proud?" Cole asked one evening, tossing a pebble into the water. Nick sighed. "I think she'd be mad it took this long for us to find something worth staying for." "You mean Lily?" "I mean both of us," Nick said quietly. "She brought something out of you that I lost years ago." Cole looked down. "I just danced." Nick shook his head. "You gave hope. That's rarer than money." Daniel stood at the window watching them, his heart full but heavy. He saw pieces of himself in both brothers, Nick's fear, Cole's faith. It reminded him of the line between wealth and poverty, and how both could trap a man in silence. That night, when everyone went to bed, Daniel went to his study. The house was dark except for the single lamp glowing over his desk. He picked up the framed photo of his wife and Lily taken 2 weeks before the accident. Her smile, bright and gentle, looked at him like a memory he still hadn't earned. "You'd love him," Daniel whispered. "Both of them." But outside the walls of that mansion, another story was unfolding. Mark, the scarred man who had terrorized them, hadn't disappeared like everyone believed. He had been hiding on the outskirts of town, nursing his wounded arm, watching. He had lost his gang, his car, and the last shred of control he had left. But he hadn't lost his hatred. He blamed Daniel for everything: the failed deal, the police raid, the humiliation. One night, under the yellow hum of a street lamp, he made a call. "The billionaire still got them," he told the man on the other end. "The kid and his brother. I want them both." By morning, danger was already crawling closer, but no one inside knew it yet. That day was supposed to be special, Lily's first attempt to stand again. Dr. Evans had come early, setting up bars in the therapy room. The air buzzed with quiet hope. Daniel stood beside her, holding her trembling hand, while Cole knelt on her other side, whispering encouragement. "You've got this, robot," he said softly. "Just one push." Lily took a deep breath, her face tight with concentration. Her fingers tightened around the metal rails. Her right leg twitched, then lifted, then locked. The left followed. Her body trembled like a leaf in wind, but she stood. For the first time since the crash, she stood. Kay gasped and covered her mouth. Daniel's heart nearly broke open from the sound of her small laugh. He didn't even realize he was crying until Cole said, "She did it." Daniel dropped to his knees beside her and whispered, "You're my miracle." Lily looked at him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No," she said softly, "he is." She looked at Cole. Later that afternoon, Daniel gathered everyone in the living room for lunch. The table was covered with food, real, homemade dishes, not the kind the chef usually served but the kind that carried warmth. Kay had cooked, insisting it was time to celebrate something other than survival. Laughter filled the air again. Nick was quiet but smiling, and for once, Mason even cracked a joke that made Lily giggle. Daniel thought maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them. Then the phone rang. Mason answered. His face changed instantly. "Sir," he said after a moment, voice grim, "you need to hear this." Daniel stood. "What is it?" Mason lowered his voice. "The police just found one of Mark's men near the highway. He was carrying a note addressed to you." Daniel took the paper Mason held out. It was damp, the handwriting jagged and angry. "You took what was mine. I'll take what's yours." Daniel's blood went cold. He didn't need to guess what that meant. His eyes darted to Lily, who was laughing at something Cole said, her head tilted back in joy. His pulse roared in his ears. "Mason," Daniel said, "double security. Nobody leaves the house. Not even to breathe." Mason nodded and moved fast, barking orders into his radio. Kay sensed the shift immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked. Daniel forced a calm he didn't feel. "Just a precaution." But that night he didn't sleep. Every light in the house stayed on. Every sound made him flinch. Around 2 a.m. Cole woke up from a noise, a low hum from outside, like an engine idling too close. He slipped out of bed and looked through the window. A van was parked near the far hedge. 2 figures moved around it. Cole's stomach twisted. He ran down the hallway barefoot and banged on Daniel's door. "They're back," he whispered. Daniel was already awake, hand gripping the gun he kept by the bed. "Stay with Lily," he ordered. "Don't move until I say so." Mason and 2 guards were already moving through the yard when Daniel stepped outside. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, turning everything into shadow. The van's headlights cut through the fog just as a voice called out. "Come out, Pierce. You cost me everything." It was Mark. Daniel stepped into the open, rain starting to fall again. "You've already lost," he shouted. "Go home before this gets worse." Mark laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. You think money keeps you safe? You think kindness saves you? You'll learn what loss feels like again. He fired a shot into the air. Inside, Lily screamed. Cole grabbed her wheelchair, pulling her toward the hallway. Come on, robot, we're not waiting this time. She gripped the arms tightly, face pale but determined. Dad, she cried. Daniel ducked as another shot shattered a garden lamp. Mason returned fire, but Mark was already moving, darting toward the garage for cover. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Someone had called for help, but they were minutes away. Daniel crouched behind a stone pillar, his hands shaking. He wasn't a man used to guns. His wars were fought in boardrooms, not gardens. But when he looked up and saw Cole at the window holding Lily's hand, something in him hardened. He wasn't a businessman tonight. He was a father. He aimed carefully and shouted, You don't have to do this. Mark's voice came back, cracked and bitter. You had everything. I had nothing. And then you took them, the boys, the peace, the chance to start over. Daniel's eyes widened. The boys? Mark laughed darkly. You think they told you everything? Ask your dancer who his father really was. Daniel froze. Cole's father? The words rang strange and sharp, but before he could think, Mark fired again. The bullet ricocheted off the wall near the fountain. Mason's men tackled him seconds later, the van door flying open as another man tried to run. By the time the police arrived, it was over. Mark was dragged away, shouting curses that didn't make sense. But Daniel couldn't forget that one sentence. When dawn came, the rain had stopped. The police left. Mason sealed the gates again. Inside, the family sat in silence, shaken but safe. Cole sat at the edge of the couch, staring at the floor. Daniel approached him slowly. What did he mean? He asked gently. Cole didn't answer. Cole, Daniel said again, softer. You can tell me. Cole lifted his eyes, tears shining. My father worked for you, he said quietly. Years ago. Before the accident. He was your driver. His name was George. Daniel's heart stuttered. George Cole, he whispered. He died in the crash. The one that killed my wife. Cole nodded. He was taking her to the hospital that day. Mom told us. That's why Nick hates you. He thinks you blamed Dad. Daniel's knees nearly gave out. He sank into the chair, covering his mouth. I never blamed him, he said hoarsely. It was raining. A truck lost control. He broke off, shaking his head. I didn't know you were his son. Cole's voice was small. Now you do. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the clock. Lily's voice finally broke it. That's why you danced for me, she said softly. Because you knew what it felt like to lose everything. Cole looked at her and nodded. I didn't mean to end up here. I just saw her and I couldn't walk away. Daniel stood, his face pale but resolute. You didn't just end up here, he said. You were sent. Maybe by the same God who didn't let me die with my wife that day. He reached out, pulling Cole into an embrace that broke every wall left between them. Your father saved mine once. You saved my daughter. I won't forget either. That night, the house was quiet again. The storm had passed for real this time. Daniel stood by Lily's bed as she slept, her hand curled around the bottle cap Cole had given her months ago. In the hallway, Cole and Nick sat together, finally free of the weight they'd carried. Do you think it's over? Nick asked. Cole smiled faintly. No. I think it's just beginning. Outside, the first light of dawn stretched over the mansion, touching every broken corner with warmth. It was the kind of morning that felt like forgiveness, a new chapter written by hands that had once only known loss. For the first time since the crash, Daniel didn't feel like a man trying to fix what was broken. He felt like a man learning how to live again. The morning began with birdsong, soft and full, the kind that made the mansion's walls seem alive again. The storm was gone. The sky stretched clean and blue over the gardens that once carried the sound of gunfire and screams. Daniel woke before sunrise, something he hadn't done in years without reason. He walked through the halls barefoot, listening to silence that finally felt peaceful instead of haunted. For the first time since the crash, he didn't feel trapped inside his wealth. He felt grateful. Downstairs, Kay was already in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of pancakes and warm syrup filled the air, wrapping the house in comfort. Cole was at the counter, flipping one with a grin that made her laugh. You're better at that than me, she teased. I just don't get scared when the butter pops, he said, his eyes bright. She smiled. That's because you've already been through fire, kid. When Daniel stepped in, they both turned. He looked lighter, almost unrecognizable without the usual edge in his shoulders. "Smells like peace," he said softly, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Where's Lily?" "Upstairs," Kay said. "She wanted to stand by herself this morning before anyone came in. Said she wanted to surprise you." Daniel smiled, a small tear blurring his vision. She already did the day she laughed. He went upstairs quietly, not wanting to ruin the moment. He opened the door just enough to see her. She was by the window, standing on her own, holding the railing with one hand. Her knees trembled, but she stood. The sunlight framed her like a promise fulfilled. Daniel didn't speak. He just watched, hands trembling, until she noticed him. "I did it, Dad," she whispered. He walked over slowly, afraid that one wrong step would break the miracle. "You did," he said, his voice cracking. She leaned into his arms, and he hugged her like a man who had finally touched grace after years of running from it. Later that morning, the whole family gathered outside. Lily wanted to show Cole something. She stood again, slower this time but stronger. "Robot learned new moves," she said proudly. Cole laughed and started to dance around her, slow and careful so she could follow. Her feet shuffled. Her arms lifted slightly. The others clapped quietly. Even Mason, standing guard by the gate, smiled without hiding it. Daniel couldn't stop recording on his phone, tears falling freely. "I'm sending this to Dr. Evans," he said. "He'll never believe it." Lily laughed again, brighter now. "Tell him miracles don't need doctors." When the music ended, Lily looked up at Cole and said, "You kept your promise." Cole nodded, eyes soft. "And you kept yours." Then, as if the moment needed one more miracle, Nick stepped forward with something in his hand, a folded piece of paper, old and creased. "I found this," he said quietly, "in Mom's Bible. I think it was meant for you, Cole." He handed it over and stepped back. Cole unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was rough, faded. It read, "If you ever get lost, remember that joy is your compass. Don't chase gold, chase light. Love will find you where money can't." Cole's throat tightened. "She wrote this before she died," he whispered. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then she knew the ending before we did." Cole looked up, eyes shining. "I think I was supposed to come here." "I know you were," Daniel said. For a while, peace seemed unbreakable. The house was alive with life again. Laughter, movement, plants. Dr. Evans officially discharged Lily from therapy a week later. Kay started cooking dinner for everyone every night. Even Mason softened enough to play chess with Nick by the fountain. But one afternoon, while Daniel was in his study reviewing documents, his assistant called from the city. "Sir," she said nervously, "someone's been looking into your charity files. Anonymous emails. They're asking about the family you donated to after your wife's accident." "The Cole family." Daniel's breath caught. "What about them?" "They're asking if you're supporting them again. If you're hiding something." He froze. The world had a cruel way of trying to twist good things. "Ignore it," he said finally. "If kindness becomes a scandal, let it." He hung up, staring out the window. The wind moved through the trees, bending them but not breaking them. That evening he told Kay what happened. She frowned. "People will always talk, Danny. They don't understand what this means." He nodded. "They don't need to. They'll see it." He meant the story, Lily's healing, Cole's hope, Nick's redemption. A story the world couldn't twist because it wasn't built on power. It was built on love. That night, Lily asked him to sit by her bedside. She was reading her children's Bible, finger tracing the lines. "Dad," she said, "why do bad people always come before good things happen?" Daniel smiled sadly. "Because light doesn't mean much until you've seen dark." "So the dark helps?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said, brushing her hair back. "Sometimes it teaches you where home really is." Weeks passed and the seasons shifted. The leaves outside turned amber and gold. The mansion that once felt like a cage now felt like a storybook home, one that carried laughter in its walls. Daniel watched his daughter play piano in the evenings while Cole and Nick hummed along. The bond between them had become something sacred, unspoken, but strong. It wasn't about blood. It was about what they'd all survived together. One evening, a black car stopped by the gate. Mason met the driver, who handed him an envelope before leaving. Daniel opened it at the dinner table. Inside was a single photo. Mark, the man who'd attacked them behind bars, holding a sign that read, "I'm sorry." Attached was a letter from his lawyer. "My client asked that this be delivered to the people he hurt. He says he found faith." Daniel passed it around the table in silence. When it reached Cole, he stared at it for a long moment. "Can people like him really change?" he asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "People like all of us can." Lily smiled softly. Then we should forgive him. Cole looked at her, then at the photo again. Yeah, he said finally. We should. He tore the letter in half, not out of anger but to let go of the past, and tossed it into the fire. The paper curled, burned, and vanished into light. That night, after everyone went to bed, Daniel walked into the garden alone. The air was cool, filled with the sound of crickets and the soft trickle of the fountain. He stood where Cole had danced that first night, the same stone where grief had turned to hope. He could still see it all if he closed his eyes. A barefoot boy spinning under sprinklers, his daughter's first laugh in months, his own heart breaking open. He smiled, looking up at the stars. You did it, George, he whispered. Your boys are safe. The next morning, the house woke early. Kay was already decorating for Lily's recovery celebration, as she called it. Balloons filled the halls. The smell of cake and roasted chicken drifted through every room. Daniel dressed in a simple white shirt instead of his usual suit. When he walked out, Cole whistled playfully. You look like a dad on vacation. Daniel chuckled. Maybe I finally am. The guests that day were few, Dr. Evans, some neighbors, and the small staff who had stayed through everything. But the joy in the room made it feel like a full house. Lily stood again during her father's speech, holding Cole's hand for balance. My dad used to say money fixes everything, she said, voice trembling. But I learned that love fixes more. The guests clapped softly, some wiping tears. Daniel pulled her close and whispered, You just said what I've been trying to learn my whole life. When the evening came and the guests left, the family stayed outside by the fountain, watching the sky turn orange and pink. Nick strummed an old guitar Mason had found in storage, Cole danced barefoot in the grass, and Lily clapped along. Kay laughed until she cried. Daniel sat on the steps, heart swelling with quiet gratitude. Everything he'd ever lost had found its way back in another form. His wife was gone, but her kindness lived in Lily. His guilt was gone, replaced by the warmth of two boys who had shown him what mercy looked like in motion. As darkness settled, Lily yawned and leaned against Daniel's shoulder. Dad, can we make this our forever? He smiled, kissing her forehead. We already have. She smiled sleepily. Good. When the lights went out that night, Daniel stayed up a little longer, writing in his old journal, the one he hadn't touched since the accident. Today I watched my daughter walk. I watched forgiveness breathe. I watched hope dance barefoot in my garden. And for the first time, I am not afraid of tomorrow. He closed the book and placed it on the shelf beside the photo of his wife. She'd be proud, Kay said softly from the doorway. He turned and smiled. I think she's the one who sent them here. Before bed, Daniel stepped out onto the balcony one last time. Below him, Cole sat by the fountain, staring up at the stars, whispering something under his breath, probably another prayer of thanks. The night air was still, peaceful, real. Daniel breathed deeply, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, complete. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was right. As he turned to go inside, he glanced at the reflection in the fountain one more time, the place where the story had begun. A billionaire who thought he could by healing, a homeless boy who gave it freely, and a paralyzed girl who found her voice again through love. It was a story of loss, grace, and light. The kind of story the world needed to hear. He smiled into the quiet and said, maybe this is what miracles look like. Ordinary people choosing love even when life gives them reasons not to. Then he switched off the garden lights, closed the balcony door, and let the house rest. And as the stars shimmered above the mansion, one could almost hear a faint rhythm in the night. A heartbeat, a memory, a dance that never really ended. Would you still believe in miracles if they came through people you never expected? Drop your answer in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel to support our growth.